Right next to the well, an old local man lay motionless, his body covered in red dust. A trail of dried blood stretched from his waist down to the ground. His thin arm was reaching out as if he had tried to crawl there for a drink of water. Elias tightened his grip on the bucket handle, his eyes scanning the yard, silent, not a soul in sight. Only the sound of wind whistling through the broken fence. He stepped forward and knelt down. The old man's skin was burning hot. His breath shallow and irregular. His cloudy eyes cracked open, letting out a raspy whisper. Elias asked new questions. He unstrapped the canteen from his belt and slowly poured water onto the old man's lips. He stood up and dragged the man into the shade under the eaves. Pulling out an old dagger, he sliced open the shirt around the wound. Elias washed it clean with well water and wrapped it temporarily using torn strips from an old shirt. Once he was done, he leaned against a wooden pillar and lit a cigarette. Smoke curled upward, mixing with the old man's labored breathing. Elias knew this would bring trouble to the farm. But looking at the man lying still by the well, he just could not let him die like some abandoned animal. The late afternoon sunlight was beginning to soften. A breeze swept through, carrying the scent of dry earth, and Elias could feel it clearly. The long-standing silence of the farm had just been broken. 2 days later, just as the sun was rising, Elias stepped out into the yard and realized the old man was gone. No sound of footsteps, no trace left behind except for a trail of dry soil stretching out toward the fields. He had left as quietly as he came. Elias leaned against the porch pillar and spat out the cigarette butt. "All right, then," he muttered. "At least he's alive." He turned toward the barn to check on the cattle, ready for another ordinary day. But by midday, the sound of hooves echoed from afar. Elias frowned, grabbed his Winchester rifle, and walked toward the gate. Through the haze of red dust, 6 figures emerged. 6 Apache women on horseback. They stopped just outside the fence, each one tall and strong, muscles taut beneath sun-darkened skin. The one in front, Scylla, dismounted. She stood tall, her deep black eyes fixed on Elias. "You saved Elder Newell," she said, her voice low and commanding. "We are here to serve and repay our debt." Before Elias could respond, they all got off their horses. Nora led the horses to the well and began drawing water. Luma rolled up her sleeves and started gathering the dry hay. Tar pulled the chain to close the gate. Wicker and Anya headed straight to the fence line, inspecting each wooden post. Elias stood frozen, the rifle still in his hand. "Hold on," he barked, but they ignored him. By noon, a pot of steaming stew was sitting in the middle of the yard. Elias watched as the 6 women sat around the fire, eating and chatting in Apache, as if this was their home. He tapped the barrel of his rifle against the wooden post. "I did not invite anyone here." Scylla looked up, her gaze sharp as a blade. "And you are not sending us away. You saved the soul of the tribe. Now the tribe gives back." Through our service, Elias clenched his jaw. A part of him wanted to send them all packing. But as he looked around, the fence now straighter, the horse stable clean, and the yard quieter than it had ever been, he just grunted and turned away. That night, the 6 women lit a campfire out in the yard. Their husky voices sang into the night, mingling with the sound of insects. Elias sat on the porch, his back resting against the wooden pillar, the tip of his cigarette glowing red. For the first time in many years, the ranch was no longer completely silent. The next morning, Elias woke up to the sound of loud hammering out in the yard. He opened the door and saw Na hanging a saddle on a freshly built rack while Tar was splitting firewood right in the middle of the yard with an axe. "What the hell are you doing?" Elias barked. Scylla did not even look up. "Still working on rebuilding the fence. We are fixing what you have neglected." Elias bit down on his cigarette and said nothing. He knew they were not going to listen to him anyway. All day the 6 women worked without rest. Luma was clearing weeds around the garden. WA inspected the trail that led into the ranch. Anya climbed down into the well and scrubbed away the moss and algae. By midday, when Elias brought the cattle back, he found the barn swept clean. The water troughs filled and the hay stacked neatly. Even the barn roof had been patched to keep the wind out. He stood for a moment, hands on his hips. The ranch had not been this orderly since his wife and child were gone. That evening, the 6 women built a large fire. Venison sizzled on skewers, and the rich smell filled the yard. Elias sat on the porch, trying to ignore it, but his stomach was already growling. Anya walked over and placed a piece of meat on a wooden slab beside him. "Eat," she said plainly. Elias stared at it. But in the end, he took it. "You are not my boss." And you just shrugged. "Of course not." Her answer left Elias speechless, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward ever so slightly. That night, soft laughter echoed from the fire. Wicca was telling a story in her native tongue, and the others giggled quietly. Elias lay in bed listening to the sound drifting through the window. It had been a long time since laughter was heard on the ranch. The next morning when Elias walked out into the yard, he saw a homemade mousetrap placed right by the hay storage. "Who made this?" "Wicca," Sailor replied. "Your storage will not have mice anymore." Elias scratched his chin and said, "Nothing." He only realized he had stopped snapping at them. The ranch no longer felt empty. It was coming back to life in a way he never expected. Rumors spread like dry fire. Within just a few days, the entire town of Cinderbrush was whispering about how Elias Ward is keeping 6 Apache women on his land. One afternoon, with the sun still hanging in the sky, the thunder of hooves echoed in the distance. Elias was tying a rope when 4 riders came through the gate. Leading them was Hank Dobbs, the saloon owner known for stirring up trouble. Hank pulled his horse to a stop, glancing around the yard like he was inspecting property that belonged to him. "Ward," he drawled. "The town does not like the sight of you harboring 6 squaws out here. It is stirring up problems. You ought to clear them out before trouble finds you." Elias stood upright, one hand resting casually on the grip of his rifle. "This is my land. Who works here is my business." Hank spat on the ground and let out a dry laugh. "It is not just your business. Folks do not want them around. They bring trouble." Before Elias could reply, Sailor stepped out from the stable. Her shadow stretched long across the ground, her muscles glistening with sweat. Behind her, Nora, T, Luma, WA, and Anna emerged one by one, forming a line. No one spoke, but their eyes sliced through the riders like blades. The air turned heavy. Only the wind and the quiet snorts of the horses filled the silence. "You are bringing trouble on yourself, Ward," Hank said, his gaze flicking to the 6 women. "When they turn on you, you will not have time to regret it." Elias lifted the Winchester off his shoulder, not pointing it, but holding it firmly across his chest. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Anyone takes one more step past that fence, they are not walking back out." Hank stared at him for a long moment, then let out a dry chuckle. "Fine, but you will be hearing from us soon." The 4 riders turned their horses and galloped away, leaving a cloud of red dust behind. Elias lowered the rifle and looked back at the 6 women. Sailor gave him a single nod, a silent thank you. That evening, they worked quietly, but something in the air had changed. This was no longer about repaying a debt. Now, they stood together in the face of a real threat. "I am deeply grateful to have you here. If this story brought back old memories, dusty afternoons, the sound of hooves echoing in your chest, then subscribe to my channel so that each day we can sit together once more and I will tell you another tale from the West." The next night, the sky was pitch black, not a single star in sight. Elias was cleaning his rifle inside the cabin when the sharp smell of smoke suddenly hit his nose. He jumped up, shoved the door open, and ran out onto the porch. Flames were bursting from the hay storage on the east side of the yard. The bales of straw ignited like torches, casting a blazing red light across the entire ranch. "Nora!" Elias roared, grabbing a water bucket. N and T were already running toward the blaze before he even reached the shed. The 3 of them charged into the fire, dousing it with water. TA shoveled dirt onto the burning hay, sending thick black smoke swirling into the air. Sila was leading the panicked cattle away while Luma and Wa passed buckets of water from the well in a steady rhythm. Anna climbed up onto the roof and tore down the burning torches still clinging to the rafters. Elias choked and coughed. Sweat and ash plastered across his face, but he did not stop. Finally, the fire died out, leaving only thick smoke and a smoldering blackened pile of straw. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. S.A. picked up a half-burned scrap of cloth from the dirt and held it up for Elias to see. It was a piece of shirt marked with the symbol of the Dobbs gang. "This is a warning," Sila said, her voice low. Elias clenched his fists. "No, they want us gone." That very night, they began fortifying the ranch. Elias built a small watch post by the fence and placed the Winchester rifle on it. Sailor and N dug trenches around the hay storage to redirect water in case of fire. Luma hung tribal herb bundles around the yard.